Sí, hey, sí, hey, hola, hola ya, sí, hey, hey, sí, hola, hola,
Comentamos a ustedes que unos minutos para dar inicio con esta conferencia magistral de la doctora Deborah Stipek, que nos acompaña de la Universidad de Stanford. Unos momentos para dar inicio con esta conferencia magistral. Pedirles de manera respetuosa a quienes ya nos acompañan en este salón de actos Baltasar Muñoz Lumbier, que si ustedes traen su teléfono celular, por favor mantenerlo en la modalidad de vibrar o en silencio. Esto para un mejor desarrollo de esta conferencia magistral. Adelante, maestro.
Es ¿no? Es de IXA, ¿no?
No, es de IXA.
Es de IXA, ¿no?
Ajá, de IXA igual está, ¿no?
Ahí está atrás del de azul.
No me dijo nada. No.
El mundo.
Puros directores.
El mundo, ya está, ¿no?
Ya. Déjame, ahorita checo rapidísimo. Voy a usar mis binoculares de 10 equipos. Ahora sí. Gonzalo Villegas, la 1, la 2, la 1, Isea, el Ligby, el Zoom. Ellos no se mencionan.
Ahí está.
No me falta anotar Ixum, la 1, Ixum, Ligby, Isea.
Más pronto, nada más hay 3.
1, la 1, la 3, el Ligby,
¿La 3 dónde
Isea,
está?
hasta el Titín está volteado de camisa azul, no trae corbata.
Está muy negro, no se ve, ¿verdad?
La 3, el Ligby, Isea y el Ixum. 1, 3.
¿Isea es el que está atrás o es del.?
No, el
¿El detrás del pequeño quién es? ¿Es Isea?
Es el de Isea.
Claro, confundo con el de IXA.
Isea.
Nos está echando mal con el bar, ¿verdad?
Sí. Es que se fue su sustituto.
¿Puedo imprimir todos o qué? ¿Va a estar así?
Hoy estamos fantásticos.
¿Pinche matón? ¿Qué?
Deborah Stipek Mudd. El 13 es el festival del Día de las Manos en Monterrey. Esta parte que miércoles 16, creo que una inauguración de la bahía. Sí. ¿Estás seguro?
Pero si te vas a sentar con nosotros, se te pierdes. Pinche productor. Apagar y trabajar. Algo no es para trabajar.
Recibimos en este recinto universitario a la doctora Deborah Stipek, que nos acompaña de la Universidad de Stanford. Bienvenida a la Universidad Autónoma del Estado de Hidalgo. Agradecemos la presencia de autoridades universitarias, funcionarios, académicos y alumnos. Señoras y señores, sean todos ustedes bienvenidos. Escucharemos la lectura de la semblanza de la doctora Deborah Stipek, a cargo del doctor Roberto Rodríguez Gaona, secretario de Desarrollo Internacional de la Universidad Autónoma del Estado de Hidalgo. Adelante, doctor.
Buenas tardes a todos y a todas. Professor Stipek, allow me to say a few words in Spanish, please. Es para mí un gusto tener el privilegio de leer la semblanza de la doctora Stipek, que, como bien saben, actualmente es la directora de la Escuela de Educación de la Universidad de Stanford. Es además profesora de Educación y Sociología en la misma Universidad de Stanford. La doctora Stipek tiene estudios en psicología, es licenciada en psicología en la Universidad de Washington y es doctora en psicología del desarrollo por la Universidad de Yale. Su enfoque actual es en estrategias para desarrollar las destrezas académicas básicas de los niños y las niñas pequeñas y al mismo tiempo fomenta su desarrollo social, emocional y su motivación. Además, ha pertenecido al Consejo de la Niñez, Juventud y Familia de la Academia Nacional de Ciencias. Fue presidenta del Comité del Consejo de Investigación Nacional para el aumento del compromiso y la motivación para aprender de los estudiantes en la escuela secundaria y actualmente es miembro de la Academia Nacional de Educación. Deborah Stipek ha sido galardonada con destacadas distinciones. Mencionaré únicamente dos: el premio Haitink a la mejor investigación del aprendizaje y el logro, y en el año 2012, el premio Silicon Valley a mujeres de influencia. Es un honor tenerla con nosotros a la profesora. Welcome again.
Conferencia magistral de la doctora Deborah Stipek de la Universidad de Stanford.
Well, that was a very good beginning. I am so delighted to be here in this beautiful, beautiful university and to meet you all. I wish I could speak to you in Spanish. My Spanish is very bad. So I will speak to you in English and be very impressed that you are able to understand. I'm going to talk about motivating children to love learning. Actually, it's a lot easier than you may think, because children are born to love learning. Think about how much a child learns between the age of 0 and 3 or 4. They don't get graded. Nobody tells them they have to learn. They're eager, enthusiastic learners. They're curious. They're trying to understand how their world works. Sometimes it can be annoying because they're opening all the kitchen cabinets and closing the doors because they're learning a new thing that they hadn't known before, which is opening doors. which is a great accomplishment for a 1-year-old. Children, when they're 2, 3, 4, 5, are typically quite enthusiastic about learning. They like learning letters. They like learning numbers and counting to 10. They are very proud to be able to write their name. It's kind of downhill from then on. Let's think forward to, let's say, a 10-year-old. So if you ask most 10-year-olds why they go to school, how many do you think would say to learn? Nah, they'd say I go to school because I have to, because I don't have any choice, because my mom makes me, because you're supposed to go to school. They may say they like school, but usually when they like school, it's because they like recess, they like playing soccer, they like their friends. So school may be okay as a social place or a place for athletics, but not very many 10-year-olds are really eager, enthusiastic learners, not the way they were when they were 5. So let me show you a picture. Did I lose? Oh, next, please. We're just learning how to coordinate this here, so our technology is not fully advanced. This is a picture of a little boy. I think he's, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old. It was on the front page of a newspaper in the San Francisco area in California, the first day of school, and already dreaming of next summer. I think this picture captures very well what we think about school. It's not supposed to be fun. It's something you just have to do. And in fact, what we found is that interest in learning tends to decline pretty much from the day children begin school, sometimes beginning even before. Sometimes it takes a few years. This is a study that was done by a friend of mine where she gave children a survey about how interested they were in learning new things and that sort of thing. And what you see is that each year, these are grades, so 3rd grade is about 8-year-olds, up to 8th grade is about 13-year-olds. Each year there's a decline in interest in learning. So what happens? Children start out in the world engaged, interested, curious, wanting to learn, and by the 8th grade, they see no reason whatsoever for learning except maybe to get good grades or to get by or to keep from being punished. This is the typical trajectory that I see in the US and other countries that I visited. Mexico may be an exception, but I kind of doubt it. So one question is, should we care? So if I have a child who says, the only reason I like to go to school is because I like to play soccer, or I like to see my friends, as long as my child is doing the work, getting reasonably good grades, is going to be able to go to a good high school, why should I care whether he actually enjoys school or enjoys learning or cares about learning? What difference does it make? I've actually had one father say to me, school shouldn't be fun. Learning shouldn't be fun. It wasn't fun when I went to school, so I don't know why it should be fun for my son. And anyway, school is really preparation for work, and work isn't fun, so if we really want to prepare children for work, school shouldn't be fun. Well, I disagree wholeheartedly. First of all, I think work is fun. At least my work is fun, and for my children, I hope very much that they do choose a profession that they do enjoy and that they do have fun with. And I think kids should have fun in school because they spend a lot of time there. But there's even more important reasons. Okay, again. So this is research that compares people in situations in which they're enjoying the learning situation versus those in which they are not enjoying the learning situation. They're just doing it. So what happens for people who are actually enjoying the learning, they're more likely to seek challenges. They're more likely to try to move to the next level, to take on the harder problems. If they run into difficulty, they're more likely to persist, to keep trying, to try to understand it, to stick with it. There's actually research that shows that when people are enjoying or are interested in what they're learning, They learn it at a deeper, more conceptual level. They understand it more deeply. They also remember it longer. People who enjoy learning are like you. They seek learning opportunities outside of school, outside of work, outside of what's necessary, what's required of them. And most of all, children who enjoy learning, who actually like the learning process, tend to succeed. They tend to do better than children who just get along. When people are not enthusiastic about learning, when they don't enjoy it, they look for the easy way out. They try to do the least required, just what you absolutely have to do to get by. They give up easily. If they run into difficulty, there's no reason to keep trying. They learn more superficially. They forget quickly. They don't seek opportunities to learn outside. I don't know, some of you may be teachers and are familiar, well actually, as students you're probably familiar with this. What's going to be on the test? How many chapters? Are we going to go back to the chapters before the first test, or do we only have to get tested on the chapters since the first test? How long does this paper have to be? Single-spaced or double-spaced? You certainly would not want to write a page more than is required, or study a chapter that isn't going to be on the test. So we're very strategic. When we're not really enjoying learning, we learn in fact, I was fantastic at figuring out what the professor was going to put on the test. I was so good at this that other students would come and ask me, what's going to be on the statistics test next Wednesday? Because I could read the professor. Well, that was what I was doing in college. I was trying to read the professor and trying to predict what was going to be on the test, rather than trying to learn statistics, which it turns out in my profession I really need a lot. So we become very strategic, we focus our efforts just on what's necessary. We do just what is necessary to get along. And often, for many students, getting along, if they're not really enjoying the learning or don't have any real goal of mastering or understanding, they cheat. I don't know about Mexico, but I know in the US, cheating in high school has become a serious problem. Partly because the pressure that students are under, but partly because they care more about performing than they do about learning. So what I find is that by 16, most kids seem to group into one of 4 groups. So the first group, can you see how engaged those students are? The first group are basically disengaged. Many of them drop out of school. By 16, a lot of our students in the US, I think about a fourth of them, drop out of high school. Just doesn't do anything for them. They're totally disengaged. Some of them stay in school, but that's what they look like when they're in school. The second group are students who kind of go through the motions. They do what they need to do to get by. And as you notice, the student on the right over there, getting by means copying whatever the student on the left is writing down. So he's obviously not really interested in mastering the material. He's interested in just getting this assignment or this test out of the way. Then there are a group of students, some of them are probably sitting in this room, who feel pressured, who feel stressed out. I mean really stressed out. They have very high aspirations, they have very high standards for themselves, or their parents have very high aspirations and have very high standards for them. And they feel pressured to meet those standards. So the parent who says, if you're going to get into this high school, you better get the top score on these tests. So they feel the pressure. And that's pretty much their learning experience. And then there's the fourth group, and I don't see a whole lot of these, but we're going to make more of them, are people who are genuinely enthusiastic. Now, most people don't fall simply into one group or another. So for example, my son in high school, in his philosophy class, He was group 4. He would come home and talk about the philosophers he was learning about in school all evening. Our dinner conversations were completely consumed by Kant. I know quite a bit about Kant now, not because I studied it myself, but because my son brought home what he learned in school. On the other hand, in his Spanish class, he was group 2. He just did the minimum to get a C, which is kind of a mediocre grade. So he got an A+, the top grade in philosophy, the minimum grade to stay in school and pass in Spanish. Okay, so I want a raise of hands. Now, I know none of you here is in group 1 or was in group 1 when you were 16, because you wouldn't be here today if you were, because those kids pretty much have checked out of schooling. How many of you, when you were 16, were pretty much group 2? You were going through the motions, getting by. Let's see a raise of hands. Anybody want to confess? Come on, a few of you should. Okay, there's a few, not very many, but a few, at least a few who are willing to confess. How many of you, when you were 16, felt a lot of stress and pressure, anxiety? Whoa! Ah, there we go. Okay, so I just want to point out that you are not a random selection of people from Mexico. You are in one of the top universities in Mexico, so I shouldn't be surprised at all about that. How many of you feel like you really love to learn? You really enjoy learning. Even when you were 16, you got jazzed, excited about some of the things that you were learning. Anybody? Yeah, of course. Now, most of you who felt that way didn't feel that way all the time, but at least you had an opportunity to experience that from time to time. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about how do you raise children, or how do you support friends, people you know, the students in your classes, to be mostly in group 4, or at least to have weekly, if not daily, experiences a real enthusiasm, a real eagerness, a real excitement about learning. So actually I do want to take a little deviation before we get to that, and that's on stress. And I'm doing this, I didn't even know how many people were going to raise their hands when I asked how many of you were stressed, because this is really common, and it's especially common among people who are high achievers, like the folks in this room. What many parents don't realize, what many teachers and counselors don't realize, is how much harm chronic stress does, not just mentally, but physiologically. When you're stressed, there's a biological reaction. You create, basically your immune system goes into high gear. This is because in ancient times, a fear or stress reaction usually meant your life was in danger. And so your immune system kicks in when you flee, so that if the lion catches up with you and bites you, your immune system is strong and can fight whatever the infection is that the lion bite's going to create. Well, most of us don't have to worry about lion bites anymore, but we have the same physiological reaction. And that physiological reaction is actually, when it occurs over and over frequently or is sustained, it has very powerful effects physiologically. So people who experience chronic stress have a higher probability of cancer, for example, in addition to all of the emotional sorts of problems that go along with high degrees of stress, like depression. And anxiety. So if you have a child, or if you're with people who are feeling stressed, or if you're feeling stressed, keep in mind that this is not something that's going to do you any good in the long run. And there are ways you can address an experience of stress. One of the things I do is I take a walk. There's actually physiological explanations why exercise will reduce stress, not only in that moment, but also in the long run. Another thing to do is just change the task. If you're working on your one activity or one task and you're feeling frustrated and you're feeling stressed and you're worried that you're not going to be able to get it done, do something else for a while. Because sometimes when you come back to it, it doesn't have that same, it doesn't grip you as much. The other thing that people have found to help deal with stress is to take a big project, which seems overwhelming. How am I ever going to get this done by next Thursday? And chunk it into small chunks and just say to yourself, how am I going to get this small piece done by the end of the day? And sometimes the smaller piece is less intimidating, creates less stress than thinking about the whole project. The other thing that is often recommended is to work with other people. Sometimes, especially if you're taking a class or something like that, and there are other students who are struggling, there are other students who are really trying to manage, find them and work with them. And the groupness can really reduce the individual stress and anxiety for any individual. We do not learn when we're feeling stressed. We do not love learning when we're feeling stressed. When you're anxious, your thoughts, the emotion that creates, and the thoughts that go along with that, like, oh my God, how am I going to get this done, crowd out your brain's ability to be able to focus on the tasks. So people who are stressed do not problem solve and do not work effectively. So I'm deviating a bit, but it's because wherever I go, I seem to be dealing with people who are experiencing a lot of this, and I see it becoming really serious in the United States, where students feel so much pressure to compete, to get into the best colleges and that sort of thing. So now let's go back to children who also feel stressed sometimes, but not as often. And I want to talk about what can we do as parents? What can we offer people to help them hold on to that enthusiasm they have for learning when they're young, or to help them regain it if they've lost it. It's very simple. There are 3 ingredients, and I made them all start with a C, so they're easy to remember. One, what are the ingredients of motivation, of enjoying any kind of performance or intellectual activity? One is a sense of competence. It's really not very motivating to feel incompetent. I mean, think about a time when you were in a place where you felt stupid. We've all been there. And it's a horrible feeling. It's a really horrible feeling. It's a sinking feeling. And it can be sometimes in simple situations. I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, but not long ago there was a game that people played in the US a lot called Trivial Pursuits. Do they have Trivial Pursuits in Mexico? No? Yeah, okay. Well, it was one of these things where you answer questions about TV shows, about, silly things, trivial things. I was terrible at it. And my friends always wanted to play Trivial Pursuits. It made me feel incompetent. It made me feel stupid. Now, you would think that this is a social situation, this is not a performance situation, why should I feel so, worried about this? People don't like to feel incompetent. So what would I do? I would do what people do when they feel incompetent. I would try to avoid the situation. Oh, I have to wash my hair. Sorry, I can't play Trivial Pursuits. Or if I was in the situation, I would pretend that I wasn't really paying attention. I would be thumbing through a magazine that I wasn't even interested in, pretending to be very interested in the magazine. So when I was performing badly, people would think, well, it's not that she's stupid or doesn't know this stuff, she's just not paying attention. Children do that. Children will purposefully not do work to avoid looking stupid. There have been many studies that have found that children often say they'd rather get in trouble for not doing the work, for being lazy. They'd much rather be seen as lazy than they would be seen as stupid or dumb. And so they would pretend, or they would forget their homework. Has anybody here ever heard of a child forgetting his homework? Or they would forget to bring the homework assignment home. Often when that happens, they didn't forget it at all. They didn't know how to do it, or they felt like they didn't know how to do it. One of the things about competence is that it doesn't matter whether the person is competent. What matters is whether they think they're competent. Many of you may have had the experience of being with a child or another person where you say, I know you can do these problems. No, I can't. I don't know how to do them. But they're just like the ones you did yesterday. I know you can do them. No, I can't. I don't know how to do them. They won't try. What matters to them is they don't think they can do them. And no amount of telling them that they can is going to work. In fact, there's some fairly systematic findings about a sense of competence where areas like math and science, there's a lot of evidence in the US that women, on average, tend to rate their skills and their competencies in math and science lower than males, when in fact, in most assessments, they do just as well. And in the US, women in college actually get better grades in math and sciences than the men do, but they rate their competencies lower. They're less likely to go into math and science, not because they are less competent, but because they think they're less competent. So this is a really important, critical piece. So the second ingredient is control. People don't enjoy learning, they don't enjoy doing anything when they feel like they're doing it only because they have to, because they're told to. They like to feel, and they feel more comfortable, and they enjoy situations in which they feel like they're doing something because they wanted to, they had some discretion. So whether it's in a job situation or in a learning situation, if you feel like you're being told what to do, how to do, and when to do it, I can tell you you're not performing very well, and you're certainly not enjoying it. The third ingredient is a feeling of connectedness. A feeling of being respected, valued, cared about. Socially connected, not an outcast. These three things are absolutely essential for a child or for an adult to enjoy learning, to enjoy working, to enjoy any situation in which there's a performance piece to it. And none of them, you can't get rid of any of them. It's not like, well, if you have two really good and then the third, it doesn't matter. All three have to be there. Children or grown-ups who feel incompetent, who feel like they're totally being told what to do all the time, and who feel disrespected or not valued, any one of those are not going to perform well. So how do we help children build that? Let's start with self-confidence. How do we help children? How do we help people feel that robust sense of competence? I think we'll go to the next one, I think. Okay, yeah. So here's what you need to worry about as a parent or as a teacher. One is the task that the person is being given has to be doable. But it's better if it's a little bit challenging. If you get boring tasks that are, you know how to do, that are easy, you've done them over and over again, they are not motivating. They do not give you that sense of, oh man, look what I did. They don't give you a sense of accomplishment, of pride. So one of the things a parent needs to do is make sure that the tasks that their child is being given in school are actually at the right level of difficulty. Very often they are either too easy or they're too difficult. The next is giving children feedback. Now I've had parents tell me I would never criticize my child because I don't want to undermine their self-esteem. I don't want to give them negative feedback. I only give them positive feedback. That doesn't build self-esteem. And the kind of self-esteem it builds is paper thin. I've had students who are getting a doctorate at Stanford. First time they get critical feedback on a paper, they cry. I say, why are you crying? I'm helping you become a good writer. No one's ever criticized me before. I've always gotten A's. So whatever self-confidence they had wasn't robust enough to withstand some, I thought, very constructive, very helpful, very useful feedback. So kids need both. So what research has shown is that there are different kinds of praise and different kinds of criticism to be effective to support self-confidence. For praise, it should be specific. So if your child shows you a story that they wrote, and you say, oh, that was a good story, that doesn't make them feel competent, doesn't build their confidence. If you say something like, wow, your description of the farm was so vivid, I could almost smell the cows or hear the cows mooing. Or, I really was persuaded by your argument. Be specific. That's what makes students or children feel really, really like it's meaningful, like the praise is meaningful. And if critical feedback is given to them, it needs to be informative. It needs to tell them what they can do. So you might say, your argument is really compelling, but I got lost toward the end. So you may want to try to tighten up a little bit the ending so it ties back into the beginning, so that the student or the child knows exactly what to do. Even though it's critical in a way, it actually gives them a sense of competence, a sense of confidence, because they know now what they can do. They may go running back to their table to redo it. When children come home and they say to their parents, and even students may go home to see their parents while they're in college, and they say, oh, I had a history test today. First thing that the parent says, how did you do? Right? How did you do? What does that convey? That conveys that the only thing that matters to me is your performance. I don't care what it was on. I don't care what you learned. I don't care whether I'm interested in it or whether you're interested in it. I want to know how you did. Dinner conversations are more about how are you doing as opposed to what are you learning. Now, of course, as parents, we care about how our children do. We want them to do well in school. We know that it makes a big difference in their life. But it doesn't have to be the first question we ask. It could be the second or the third. You could ask the child what the history test was on. And if it's a topic that you know something about, you might engage the child in a conversation about it. If it's a topic that you don't know very much about, you might ask the child to share what they learned about the topic, so that you engage them in thinking about what they're learning as opposed to thinking just about how they're performing. And the other thing is mistakes. What do you mean you got 11 wrong on your math test or on your math paper? What do we do when we're doing something for the first time, or we're learning something new where we're not supposed to make mistakes? Life doesn't work that way. When you're learning something new, you're supposed to make mistakes. It's normal to make mistakes. Think about anything you've learned that's new, whether it's sports or learning to cook or learning a foreign language. You should hear my Spanish. I make a lot of mistakes, which is why I'm not speaking Spanish, because I would be embarrassed. But you want to make a space for your child and in your classroom for mistakes to be okay. If your child comes home and got 11 wrong on their spelling test or on their math test, the response is not, oh, I can't believe you missed that many. You should have studied harder. The response should be, let's look at those and see if they will help us understand what you're not understanding. Maybe you didn't carry when you did subtraction, or maybe you reversed the I and the E in your spelling test. Mistakes can be informative. They can help you learn, and that's what we want to convey to children, whether they're our own children or our children in our classrooms. So let's talk about control. So what we do typically with a child who is having difficulty is not doing what we think they should be doing. So let's say your child comes home and has several bad grades in a row. You've been telling him, you know, you should spend more time studying. You should get off the TV, or I guess now TV is not the enemy, now it's the electronic games. No more. Okay, so they come home, they've got bad grades. The most common response to that is to clamp down. It's to take control. It's to say, okay, no more TV, or no more soccer. You don't have time to, or I'm taking away those electronic games. I'm taking over control because you're not using the discretion that you have appropriately. You're making the wrong choices. It's natural. And in a classroom, if the students aren't working, the natural thing for a teacher to want to do is to exercise some control. No recess today. It's the opposite of what you should do. It is absolutely the opposite. Because if you take the control away, you also take the responsibility away. So now it's no longer the child's problem, it's your problem. You're going to fix it for the child. They have no responsibility now. And moreover, they resent you for taking over. Thank you. It often creates a battle with children, or even students. It becomes a we-them sort of thing. You're trying to control them, and their goal is to not be controlled. I can guarantee it, and especially in adolescence. So when you say, no TV, go to your room, I want you to do your homework, what are most adolescents going to do? They're going to go in the room, they're going to slam the door shut, and they're going to put on earphones, and they're going to tune you out. You don't want to create an enemy situation. You don't want to take over control. You don't want to take over responsibility. So what I usually suggest is that you start by asking questions. Never propose a solution. First of all, we're often wrong. We come up with solutions that may not really be the problem. It may not be that they're spending too much time on electronic devices. It may be that they got way behind when they were sick for a week and haven't figured out what strategies they need to use to catch up. Or maybe socially they're having some difficulty with some friends and they're having difficulty paying attention to the teacher. So don't solve a problem with a solution when you don't really know what the nature of the problem is. And that requires a conversation with the child. So when a child's having difficulty or presenting problems, the first response is not to solve the problem for them, it's to help them, guide them, support them in finding the solution themselves. And a solution that they participate in is one that they're much more likely to take hold of, adopt, and actually follow through with. So if your child comes home with bad grades, instead of saying no more TV or no more electronic games or no more soccer, ask a question. What's going on? Show them that you care, that you respect their opinion. Now, the most likely answer is going to be, I don't know. But that's why they need you to help ask the right questions. So maybe you start out with an open-ended question and then you go to a multiple choice test. And you say, well, you know, you were sick last month. Do you think you got behind? Or you and Amy have been having a lot of conflict. Do you think you're distracted with your social situation? Or you were complaining that you didn't think this teacher was clear. Are you having difficulty following the teacher? So sometimes you need to, what we call in education, scaffold. You need to give them some options and help them, give them some guidance in coming up with a solution. But don't tell them what it is. Then they own it. Then once you figured out what is the nature of the problem, then you say, do you have any ideas about how we can solve this? Or maybe even better, how you can solve this? So that it really is a conversation in which the child has some control. They're not being done to. They're participating in a solution. One of the reasons why this is really important is that it really does teach problem solving. I've said to the parents before, parents of young children, I said, what are you going to do when your child goes to college and flunks his first physics test? Do you want your child to call you up and say, Mom, what should I do? No, you want your child to have some problem-solving skills, to be able to think, now what are the reasons? What happened? What can I do about it? What are the resources? Where is the support in this university? So you need to model and help them develop those problem-solving skills, and they're going to own it, and they're going to feel more control over their learning situations, and therefore more motivated when you do that. So let's go on to the third piece. We've done a feeling of competence, a feeling of control, a feeling of connectedness. Making your child feel secure. And most importantly, safe to take risks and safe to be honest. Whether you're a teacher or a parent, if children don't understand, you want them to say so. You don't want them to pretend that they do. How many of you have ever pretended that you understood when you didn't? If anybody doesn't raise their hand, you're lying. Because we do. Because we don't want to be found out. But in school, if you don't understand, you better, you can get behind. You can lose out. So you want to create an environment where you want your child, when they start having difficulty, to come home and say, Mom or Dad, I'm really having difficulty in math. I don't know what's going on. If they don't, if you say, how's math going? And they say, oh, fine. Then they come home 5 months later with a very bad grade. You missed an opportunity to intervene because they didn't want you to know, because they were afraid they'd get in trouble. So you have to somehow create for them a sense of safety, that they can say, I think I'm going to get a really bad grade in math. And if you say, you better not, you better get a good grade in math. I told you you're never going to go to such and such a high school if you don't get good grades in math. If you respond like that, they're never going to tell you again when they're having difficulty. So what's the rule? Ask a question. Why do you think you're having trouble in math? You want to be a partner. You want to be not the person who's coming down on them, but the person who is supporting them in a difficult problem-solving situation. One of the things, and this is for teachers and for parents, is just showing that we're interested in the child as a person. We're interested in their thinking, in their ideas, in their interests. Now this is hard sometimes because some kids have interests that may not be what we think they should be interested in. They may be interested in the guitar and we think the guitar is a waste of time. That's not a real instrument. Or sports, when we think they should be doing intellectual work. I knew for sure that my daughter needed to learn how to play the piano. I knew that she had to, that was the foundation of appreciation for culture and music and the arts. So I made her learn to play the piano. I made her, hear what I'm saying here, control. So she had lessons for about a year, and she kind of went along with the game, and because she was a good kid. And then I went out and bought a piano, and then about a month after I bought the piano, she said, Mom, I hate the piano, can I quit? If you weren't so far away, I'd tell you I could sell you a really good piano that's hardly been used. So I was in a dilemma that many parents find themselves in. We think we know what they should be doing, where their passion should lie, where they should develop their talents, but they're not going along with our plan. And so where do we push back and try, because we know how important it is, and when do we say, well, that's fine, honey, what do you want to do? And this is a real dilemma. I'm not saying it's an easy one. I mean, my daughter and I actually worked out, I think we came up with if you take it for 6 more months, and if you still don't like it, I'll let you quit. So we worked out a compromise, because I felt like I wished I'd learned how to play the piano, and I know as an adult she's going to wish she'd learned how to play the piano, and she's going to hate me for not making her do it. Well, she quit after the next 6 months. She later found singing was her passion. I had to keep an eye on what sorts of things was she finding to be interesting. I was so focused on what I thought was important for her, I wasn't paying attention to the fact that she had a lovely voice and never stopped singing all the time. So I never said to her, hey, would you like singing lessons? Until she came home and said, I want singing lessons. So I think that what I've learned and what the research supports is if you want your children to really be engaged and love learning, give them opportunities to develop their passions, the things that they care about. Now, if it's sex, rock and roll, and drugs, and there may be some exceptions that we want to, I'm not saying anything, but maybe some things that normally you wouldn't get up in the morning and say, boy, I sure hope my child learns to play the guitar or whatever it is that they decide is fun and interesting. One of the things that seems counterintuitive is praising children for things that you care about. And I don't mean you shouldn't praise them, but you can overpraise. So if your child comes home with really good grades, and you go, oh my gosh, that's so wonderful, that's such a good report card, let's call grandma, let's put it up on the refrigerator, you make a really big deal about it, okay? That happened to any of you? Sure. On both sides. So what is the message that grades really matter? That scores really matter? Now, think about that child when they're encountering some difficulty in school. They don't think they're going to come up with the kind of grades that got all that enthusiastic response from their family. So they could feel actually fearful. That could create pressure. That could create stress. That could make them not want to tell you what's really going on in their lives, because you've set a high standard. Now, parents will say to me, well, wait a minute, but I do want my child to get good grades. How can I not? So I'm not saying don't praise them, but be careful about the message that you give. You do not want children or students to feel that your caring about them, your interest in them is contingent upon how well they do, whether it's in sports or in the piano or in your physics class, or in the grades they bring home. So just two final things that research and in my experience have been really important for encouraging a real love of learning, a real engagement in learning, a passion for learning. One is encouraging creative play, and I see so little of this now. So many of the games and the toys and the activities that we give children are very structured. There are only 4 different things that you can do. You can push buttons, you can turn knobs, or you can basically follow the directions of a particular very structured activity. When I was a kid, I was just as happy. In fact, we didn't have those sorts of things. I had a box of ribbons and bows and crayons and little pieces of paper and glue and could spend hours and hours creating all kinds of things. We've taken away from our children in this generation the opportunity to be creative, to bring themselves to things, because the things they do are already structured, already constrained. So I'm not saying throw away all those toys, but I'm saying give your child some opportunities to really muck about, to use materials in creative ways, not just play structured games. The other thing, and I'll end with this one story. I was in a friend's house, and the father, who watched a lot of TV, his son is sitting there next to him watching TV. And the father says, "What are you watching TV for? Don't you have something to do? Don't sit there and watch TV all the time. Go do your homework or something." The father wasn't exactly modeling what he was preaching. There are times when we have great experiences as learners. We should share those with our students, with our kids, with our friends, so that they see that we enjoy learning, that we can get engaged. Go home and tell your family about, I don't know, what you learned about gardening, or making a better stew or soup, or how to motivate your child to learn, how to motivate your child to love learning. Whatever it is you've learned that day, share it, because what's more important to children than what you tell them is what you do. So if you're enjoying learning, if you're seeking out learning opportunities, don't hide those from your kids, share them. And the last thing I want to say is that, especially for this crowd, of very hard workers, by your own confession, somewhat stressed out people, play is really important. It's not just important for 3-year-olds. It's not just important for 7-year-olds. It's important for 67-year-olds. So I hope all of you are going to leave this lecture and do something just for fun. Thank you very much.
De manera respetuosa le pedimos al licenciado Jorge del Castillo Tobar, coordinador de extensión de esta Casa de Estudios, haga entrega de reconocimiento a la doctora Deborah Stipek Mudd de la Universidad de Stanford por su participación en el Festival Internacional de la Imagen FINI 2014. A continuación se realizará la ceremonia de investidura como nueva profesora honoraria de esta universidad de la doctora Deborah Stipek Mudd.
Los invitamos a permanecer, por favor, en sus lugares. Vamos a dar inicio con esta ceremonia de investidura. Recibimos a las autoridades universitarias que presiden este acto académico. Sean bienvenidas y bienvenidos en este máximo recinto solemne universitario a la ceremonia de investidura como nueva profesora honoraria visitante de la Universidad Autónoma del Estado de Hidalgo, de la doctora Deborah Stipek. Preside este acto académico maestro Humberto Augusto Veras Godoy, rector de la Universidad Autónoma del Estado de Hidalgo. Maestro Adolfo Pontigo Loyola, secretario general de esta universidad. Bienvenida nuevamente a esta casa de estudios a la doctora Deborah Stipek. Doctor Roberto Rodríguez Gaona, secretario de Desarrollo Internacional. Contador Público Ramiro Mendoza Cano, secretario general del Sindicato de Personal Académico y diputado local. Maestro Jesús Ibarra Zamudio, coordinador de la División de Docencia. Licenciado Jorge del Castillo Tobar, coordinador de la División de Extensión. Doctor José Luis Antón de la Concha, coordinador de la División de Investigación y Posgrado. Agradecemos la presencia de los señores directores de las siguientes escuelas e institutos. Licenciado José Luis Gil Chávez, director de la Escuela Preparatoria número 1. Licenciado Pipino Morales Gamero, director de la Escuela Preparatoria número 3. Doctor Orlando Ávila Pozos, director del Instituto de Ciencias Básicas e Ingeniería. Doctor Edmundo Hernández Hernández, director del Instituto de Ciencias Sociales y Humanidades. Doctor Roberto Estrada Bárcenas, director del Instituto de Ciencias Económico-Administrativas. Médico cirujano especialista José María Busto Villarreal, director del Instituto de Ciencias de la Salud. De igual forma recibimos a Carlos Francisco Serrano Aguilar, secretario general del Consejo Estudiantil Universitario del Estado de Hidalgo. Damos la bienvenida al doctor Luis Ángeles Ángeles, director general de Profesiones, en representación de la Secretaría de Educación Pública. Agradecemos la presencia de todas y todos ustedes. A continuación escucharemos la exposición de motivos a cargo del doctor Roberto Rodríguez Gaona, secretario de Desarrollo Internacional.
Buenas tardes a todos y a todas. Con su venia, señor rector, distinguidos integrantes del Presidium. El reto que tiene una universidad en el siglo XXI es consolidarse como un espacio multicultural, global, en donde la paz sea la herramienta para que la educación florezca. El día de hoy asistimos con mucho orgullo a la ceremonia de investidura como nueva profesora honoraria visitante de la universidad de la doctora Deborah Stipek. Nuestra universidad, comprometida con la formación integral del alumnado, hace un esfuerzo que la ha colocado a la vanguardia y con un liderazgo regional e internacional. Uno de los grandes retos que tenemos como universidad pública es hacer que nuestra educación haga la diferencia, que no importen las diferencias, pero que, insisto, hagamos la diferencia a través de una cultura y una educación que cimiente los valores más sagrados del humanismo que dan sentido a la civilización. Precisamente por esto, nuestro honorable Consejo Universitario ha decidido aprobar las actividades de innovación educativa para el alumnado. En estas se contiene el régimen internacional de seminarios que, como podemos apreciar, tiene como finalidad aportar una dimensión internacional en el aprendizaje y en el día a día de todas las funciones universitarias. Como parte del régimen internacional de seminarios, se encuentra la participación de la categoría de profesores honorarios visitantes internacionales, que como hemos testificado el día de hoy, se traduce en contar con la presencia de distinguidas personalidades del mundo científico, educativo, artístico y cultural, y hacer un reconocimiento a esa trayectoria. Además, la categoría de profesor o profesora honoraria visitante importa la incorporación o la adscripción de él o la profesora a la unidad académica en la que se cultiva la ciencia en la que se ha destacado él o la profesora. Para esta universidad, nuestra amada universidad, es una gran responsabilidad que con dignidad sirvamos al pueblo hidalguense, porque tenemos el gran reto de seguirnos consolidando como una de las mejores universidades de México y sin duda alguna una de las mejores o la mejor universidad del Estado. El régimen internacional de seminarios pretende en el largo plazo, con cara a la visión a 2035, consolidar una plantilla internacional de profesores para ayudar a que esta universidad sea una de las mejores 500 del planeta Tierra. De nueva cuenta estamos enhorabuena y agradezco a todos y a todas ustedes su gentileza. Muchas gracias.
Solicitamos respetuosamente al maestro Humberto Augusto Veras Godoy, rector de la Universidad Autónoma del Estado de Hidalgo, realice la investidura como nueva profesora honoraria visitante de esta casa de estudios a la doctora Deborah Stipek. Escuchemos el mensaje del maestro Humberto Augusto Veras Godoy, rector de nuestra universidad.
Buenas tardes, tengan todos y todos ustedes. Saludo con especial afecto y deferencia a nombre de esta comunidad universitaria a la doctora Deborah Stipek Mudd, conferencista magistral y a partir de hoy profesora honoraria visitante de la Universidad Autónoma del Estado de Hidalgo. Gracias, doctora, por estar en esta casa de estudios. Agradezco el acompañamiento que nos hacen los integrantes del Presidium y quiero resaltar la presencia del contador público Ramiro Mendoza Cano, diputado local y secretario general del Sindicato de Personal Académico de la Universidad Autónoma del Estado de Hidalgo, quien es en donde se encuentra depositado la confianza y el liderazgo de los profesores, investigadores y los profesores de esta casa de estudios. Gracias, Ramiro, por estar con nosotros. También tengo que agradecer con mucho afecto a un amigo de esta casa de estudios, a Luis Ángeles, quien nos acompaña en representación del profesor Joel Guerrero Juárez, secretario de Educación Pública del Estado. Gracias, Luis, por estar con nosotros y bienvenido a tu casa. Saludo también a las diferentes instituciones que nos acompañan del Estado de Hidalgo y, por supuesto, con mucho afecto y deferencia, a los directores de las escuelas e institutos que nos acompañan en esta tarde y también, si me permiten, con un gran reconocimiento y un excelente aprecio de esta casa de estudios a los profesores investigadores que nos acompañan en esta tarde, quienes son los que le dan la posibilidad autónoma del Estado de Hidalgo de que con su esfuerzo podamos tener los reconocimientos académicos que hemos logrado en esta casa de estudios. Muchas gracias, señores profesores investigadores, por estar con nosotros en esta tarde. Y a los jóvenes, a los estudiantes de esta casa de estudios, que lo he dicho, lo reitero y lo reiteraré durante mucho tiempo, son la razón de ser de esta casa de estudios y son nuestra responsabilidad. Son para ustedes quienes esta casa de estudios tiene que trabajar intensamente para poder cumplir primero con la gran responsabilidad de apoyarles en su formación. Y segundo, para que también en el momento que les corresponda, sean ustedes los líderes que van a conducir las organizaciones sociales, económicas, del sector social y productivo, o esta casa de estudios, porque son ustedes los llamados a continuar con la labor de esta casa de estudios en beneficio de toda una sociedad. Quiero también decirles a ustedes que para mí es un orgullo verles y que representan la oportunidad también para todos los que estamos aquí en este recinto de agradecerles su trabajo que hacen día a día con esa constancia y esa dedicación en su formación. Mi reconocimiento y el reconocimiento de la comunidad universitaria para todos los jóvenes estudiantes de la Universidad Autónoma del Estado de Hidalgo. Doctora Deborah, estamos en un recinto que es emblemático para esta casa de estudios. Para su conocimiento, le comento que aquí, en este espacio, se firmó hace 53 años la creación de la Universidad Autónoma del Estado de Hidalgo por el secretario de Educación Pública en aquel entonces, don Jaime Torres Bodet. Y este espacio es un espacio también solemne para los universitarios, en donde tenemos la oportunidad de vivir los actos más importantes y simbólicos para esta casa de estudios. Y el día de hoy, nosotros, la comunidad universitaria representada en este espacio y este lugar emblemático, somos testigos para darle la bienvenida a esta casa de estudios como profesora invitada internacional. Quiero decirle que es un honor para esta casa de estudios contar con ustedes y que seguramente con su trabajo, con su dedicación, sumado a lo que los profesores universitarios hacen, a lo que ellos han logrado hacer en esta casa de estudios, vamos a potenciar en mucho y a continuar con la gran responsabilidad que tenemos como institución pública de avanzar en la formación de los jóvenes universitarios que estudian en esta casa de estudios. Muchas gracias, doctora, y con gran reconocimiento de esta casa de estudios.
I am deeply honored to be a member of this great and beautiful university. I'm touched beyond anything. I'm also very grateful for having the opportunity to meet some of the students, some of the faculty, to see their enthusiasm and eagerness and motivation to learn, their commitment to being good faculty and motivating their students to learn. I've had an opportunity to meet many distinguished leaders of the university, very impressive leaders, I should say. we are neighbors, Mexico and the U.S., and yet there is so much that I feel I have to learn about your culture. I agree with the Provost for Internationalization that education is the key to our global peace and prosperity. We need to appreciate our own culture, but we also need to know and understand and value other people's culture. And today has been a wonderful opportunity for me to learn about another university in another culture. I think I've already gone away with things that I want to fix at Stanford from things that I've learned that you're doing here. I hope that this is the beginning of a longer relationship with my university. I want you to know that I take this responsibility very seriously, and that I hope I will have opportunities to actually do the work of an honorary professor of the university. So thank you all very, very much for this really wonderful opportunity and honor.
Invitamos a la doctora Deborah Stipek, realice para la memoria histórica universitaria la firma del libro de profesores honorarios visitantes de esta máxima casa de estudios. En la solemnidad de tan importante acto, escucharemos la intervención de la Camerata de Cuerdas Universitaria, que interpretará Intermezzo Sinfónico de Mascagni y Ave María de Caccini. Agradecemos esta extraordinaria interpretación de la Camerata de Cuerdas de la Universidad Autónoma del Estado de Hidalgo, dando realce a esta ceremonia académica. En este momento se realiza la toma de fotografía oficial, que será incluida en la memoria histórica de esta institución, y agradecemos la presencia de todos y todas ustedes. Por el favor de su atención, muchísimas gracias. Muy buenas tardes.
Agradecemos su presencia.
Aquí en el pasillo.